Değerli basın mensupları, translation. Bugünkü ikinci konuğumuz NATO Genel Sekreterliği, değerli dostum Jens Stoltenberg. Kendisi deprem felaketinin ardından NATO'nun ülkemizle dayanışmasını sergilemek amacıyla bugün buradalar. Sayın Genel Sekreter, NATO'nun yapabilecekleri konusunda en başından beri aktif bir tutum sergiledi ve sürekli bizleri aradı, mesajlar attı ve ilave neler yapabileceklerini sordular. O nedenle bu süreçteki gösterdikleri dayanışma ve verdikleri destek için kendilerine teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Yaşadığımız afetin yaralarının sarılması çalışmalarına diğer müttefiklerimiz de destek verdi. Süratle arama kurtarma ekipleri gönderdiler.
In the field came from our allies, and they also provided in cash and in kind assistance to meet the emergency needs. The NATO authorities, since the very beginning of the disaster, immediately took action upon our requests. And the NATO Euro-Atlantic Disaster Response Coordination Center has been coordinating this assistance since the beginning. The NATO Council has also decided the containers and the tents that are suitable for winter conditions to be sent to our country from their inventory. And this is going to host more than 3,000 people. And it's going to be actually serving for 6 months in the first phase, and it could be extended if need be. These are going to be deployed in Iskenderun and Hatay. And of course, the speedy transportation, setting up, and the operation of such accommodation needs are issues that we are jointly working on in the field. Our colleagues are actually working in the preliminary activities with the NATO teams. For this, yesterday we made a demand for the strategic air transportation facilities of our NATO allies to be activated immediately. The Secretary General actually provided the initial package of 40 containers and the 20,000 winter tents from Pakistan to be transported to our country, and has actually conveyed our demand from our allies to provide cargo planes. We are grateful for these steps that he has taken. There are going to be many tents provided from Pakistan. We have also placed our orders, and we are doing our utmost for these tents to be brought to our country. We have mobilized all our efforts, and some friendly countries are also providing us air cargo planes, and we are grateful for these. Distinguished members of the press, the Distinguished Secretary General is going to also be meeting with our President today. And following his meeting with the President, he will be traveling to the region. And our Minister of National Defense, Mr. Hulusi Akar, who is already in Hatay, and he's the minister responsible for that area, is going to be meeting the Secretary General, and they will be visiting the earthquake zone, and they will also be discussing the supplies of the accommodation that is going to be provided for NATO. They will be visiting the site for the preparation of these accommodation facilities. Once again, we're grateful to their efforts and to the efforts of our allies. Of course, having made this opportunity today, we also discussed certain regional issues, the war in Ukraine, the extension of the grain deal, and also other efforts, the latest status in the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. We had an opportunity to evaluate all these issues. Of course, like always, these are not the priority today, but we also discussed the membership to NATO for Sweden and Finland. We also shared our expectations, and also the trilateral MOU and fulfillment of the commitments of this MOU. We underlined the importance of this once again. And of course, so there are certain steps, especially steps to be taken by the Swedish side, and the provocations that took place have not been beneficial, especially the provocations in Sweden have not contributed positively. But in the end, as Turkey, we're always supporting in the strengthening and the enlargement of NATO. We are one of the countries that has an immense contribution, and we do believe that as an important ally, as Turkey, we believe strengthening NATO is important, and we will continue provide our support to NATO activities. Such support shall continue. As you know, we are one of the countries that has the greatest, actually, one of the first five countries that has greatest contribution to NATO activities, and we are one of the first eight countries that have the largest share of the general budget. Such contribution shall continue. With these thoughts, I would like to once again say welcome to my distinguished friend Jens Stoltenberg, and once more indicate that we're thankful for this visit.
Minister Çavuşoğlu there, Mevlüt, it's good to see you again, and thank you for your warm welcome, and thank you for your strong personal commitment to our alliance and to...
Bueno, hemos escuchado ya al secretario general de la OTAN, al Jens Stoltenberg, que acaba de empezar a hablar, después de que la parte turca también haya dicho lo propio. Han hablado sobre los terremotos, cómo la OTAN puede ayudar en ese sentido, pero también se ha pronunciado en la parte turca, bueno, pues respecto a el acceso de Suecia y Finlandia a la Alianza Atlántica. Han dicho que, bueno, pues con la OTAN han compartido sus opiniones, su visión de, bueno, pues cómo ven ese acceso a la OTAN. Está hablando ahora Jens Stoltenberg.
of the Turkish first responders, and we mourn with you. NATO allies lowered their flags in solidarity after the earthquake. And at this week's defense ministerial meeting, we observed a moment of silence to honor the victims. In your time of need, NATO stands with Turkey. The day after the earthquake, NATO's Disaster Response Center issued an immediate request for assistance to all NATO allies and partners. Since then, thousands of emergency response personnel have been deployed to Turkey to support the relief efforts, including with search and rescue teams, firefighters, medical personnel, and seismic experts. NATO allies continue to provide support. Military aircraft from the Netherlands, Norway, the UK, and the United States are working day and night to transport international aid to Turkey and perform medical evacuations. Other allies like Albania, Canada, and Germany are providing financial and other types of aid. And across NATO, ordinary citizens are raising millions of euros in support to Turkey. This is true and deep solidarity. I also welcome the contributions of our invitees, Finland and Sweden, showing solidarity in action. In particular, I thank Sweden for its initiative to hold an international donor conference in March. The focus going forward will be on reconstruction and supporting the displaced. That is why NATO is now setting up temporary housing for thousands of displaced people. In addition, NATO will also use our strategic airlift capabilities to transport tens of thousands of tents to Turkey in the coming days and weeks. All of this will help to save lives. NATO has a team on the ground working hand in hand with the Turkish authorities. Later today, I will meet with some of the personnel supporting these efforts and thank them for their professionalism and their dedication. So, Minister Çavuşoğlu, thank you again for hosting me today. This is a time for NATO allies and partners to come together, standing alongside the people of Turkey today and tomorrow in strong solidarity.
Destekleme zamanı. Hüseyin Ayatsever, Reuters. Benim sorum Sayın Genel Sekreteri olacak.
Mr. Stoltenberg, Turkish President Erdogan signaled that Turkey could ratify Finland's application to NATO alone. You already referred to this issue this week. You said the main question is not whether together their ratification. The main question is that they should be ratified as soon as possible. So my question is there a deadline for NATO? I mean, not a official deadline, but would it cause a problem for NATO if Turkey does not complete the ratification process till Vilnius summit? And in addition to that, Turkey objects Sweden's application mainly on terrorism-related issues. And you also emphasize that Turkey has legitimate concerns on this terrorism issue. So how this fight against terrorism issue will be discussed in Vilnius Summit. Sayın Bakan, size de bu konuda İsveç-Finlandiya konusunda kısa bir soru yöneltmek isterim. Bugünkü görüşmenizde Sayın Genel
In today's meeting, did you take into consideration any other dimension about the application of Sweden and Finland?
So my consistent position has been and remains that the time has come to ratify both Finland and Sweden and make them full members of our alliance. They have both made big steps since we signed the joint memorandum between Finland, Sweden, and Turkey in July at the NATO summit in Madrid last year. They have removed any restrictions on arms exports, strengthened their legislation on terrorism, and Sweden is also amending their constitution and stepped up the cooperation with Turkey, also established a permanent mechanism to continue to work closer with Turkey in the fight against terrorism. So I continue to believe that the time is now to ratify both Finland and Sweden. Let me also add that I fully recognize that Turkey has legitimate security concerns. No other NATO ally has suffered more terrorist attacks than Turkey. And that's the reason why terrorism was an important part of the trilateral memorandum agreed in July. That's why for NATO, the fight against terrorism is one of the main tasks. And why, of course, as we prepare for the Vilnius summit, as we continue to adapt the alliance, terrorism will be high on the NATO agenda. And I also believe that to have Finland and Sweden inside the alliance will actually strengthen our capabilities to fight international terrorism. Then on your question of whether Finland and Sweden should be ratified together, or whether it's possible to ratify Finland first and Sweden afterwards. Well, again, my position is that both can be ratified now, but the main issue is not whether they are ratified together. The main issue is that Finland and Sweden are ratified as soon as possible. Then let me also say that I know that the burning of the Quran in Stockholm has created strong reactions in Turkey. And I understand and I share the pain because I personally regard the burning of the Holy Book as a disgraceful act. And I understand the feelings of Muslims in Turkey and around the world. And therefore, I also strongly condemn the burning, but also welcome the fact that Sweden has been able to prevent other manifestations with the burning of the Quran as part of the manifestation. And I welcome also that the Swedish government and the Swedish Prime Minister has clearly condemned this disgraceful act. Not all acts which are disgraceful or immoral or provocative are illegal, but it is important to have a strong position, and that's what we have seen clearly from the Swedish government. For me, this just demonstrates that Sweden and Finland understand and are implementing policies which recognizes the concerns that Turkey has expressed, and also why I think that the time has come to ratify. Let me add one more thing, and that is that this is a Turkish decision. It's the Turkish government, the Turkish parliament that decides on the issue of ratification, and it's a Turkish decision alone. Because what has to be decided by Turkey is whether to ratify the accession documents, and that is a decision that Turkey has to take.
Çok teşekkür.
Thank you very much. Of course, during today's meeting, as I have expressed, we did focus on this issue. In relation to membership of Sweden and Finland, the process was going in parallel. And the declaration of President Erdogan in relation to Finland's membership, after this declaration, this was something that we discussed with the relevant countries and with NATO. The meaning of this is that the NATO membership process of Finland could be evaluated separately from Sweden's process. And I do believe that this is going to be coming to the agenda in the meeting today with the President Erdogan. But in relation to membership of these two countries, the attitude of Turkey has been very clear, and there is no secret agenda behind it. Meeting of the concerns of Turkey, not just on paper, but in action as well. On the other hand, we did discuss all of these since the very beginning with the contribution of the Secretary General. We discussed this in Madrid. And as Turkey, we have always respected Mr. Stoltenberg. And we have discussed this in a courageous manner, and he has always been giving in this process and contributing. And of course, we do know that the membership of these two countries are important with us during these negotiations. And while we were signing the trilateral MOU, we were also together. In the end, these two countries took certain steps. We did not deny these, and we are always believing that the steps, some of the steps that have been taken have been very positive, but especially in relation to Sweden. The obligations of Sweden, saying that all the full obligations of Sweden have been fulfilled, is not going to be a realistic approach. We have not seen the concrete steps yet. And of course, here, yes, they have taken steps to take the legislation to a much more firm stance and made a constitutional amendment. Why? But why this amendment was undertaken? As it was indicated in the MOU, financing of terrorism and recruits for terrorism, and also propaganda for terrorism. These were all to be eliminated and prevented. The law has been amended, but the same activities of PKK, YPD are continuing, like recruits to the terrorist organization, like the financing of terrorism, and the symbols of the or terrorist organization, together with the posters of the secessionist leader of this organization, they are still being exhibited. In the end, these legislations and legislative amendments were not done to make us happy. They were done to eliminate and prevent such acts, and they need to fulfill the requirements of this legislation. Just like they do not allow propaganda for Daesh, they shouldn't be allowing propaganda for PKK. And of course, this was approved by this. There were two threats that we identified. One was Russia, and the second one was terrorism in Madrid. So Turkey's concerns need to be met. Burning of the Holy Quran and Islamophobia and such hate crime and such racism is not just to be evaluated in the context of NATO membership of these two countries. We also are aware of the fact that these are acts taken to eliminate Sweden's membership, and we know that these are being done by people who are deprived of any wisdom whatsoever. But this is a hate crime, this is racism, and this is against humanity. And of course, these are against international law, these are against human rights, and this is a criminal offense. So it's not like it's a criminal offense for me and not for them. Anti-Semitism is a crime against humanity. Islamophobia is against hate crime and against humanity. It's not interpreted per se differently, but we need to take into consideration international norms accordingly and eliminate this. In the end, we do not have relatively a major problem with respect to Finland, but we are always underlining that Sweden should take concrete steps. And it was not just us that mentioned this, but Tobias Billström also visited Turkey following the Swedish Prime Minister's visit. And when he went to the parliament, this was something that he heard from all parties in the parliament. This is about political parties, and therefore both Sweden and Finland need to take these steps. Otherwise, we're not against the enhancing of the NATO alliance or the strengthening of the NATO alliance. Şaduman Türkay from Demirören News Agency. My question is to Minister Çavuşoğlu. The U.S. Secretary of State is to pay a visit to Turkey on 19th to 20th of February. Is the program of this visit certain? When are you going to meet with Secretary Blinken, and what are going to be the topics that you discuss? Thank you very much. This is actually a visit that was planned prior to the earthquake, and on 18th of January, during our meeting in Washington, D.C., we discussed that Secretary Blinken was to pay a visit to our country after the Munich security conference. We were actually planning either today or tomorrow, and most possibly after the Munich security conference, he is going to be visiting our country on Monday morning. We will be having our deliberations together here in Ankara. Of course, we are going to be thankful for the support they have rendered in relation to the earthquake. And they have constantly been in contact with us, and Mr. Blinken called me twice after the earthquake. But both from Ankara and Washington, through our diplomatic missions and our ministries, they have been asking whether they can provide any additional support. We are grateful for the support they have already rendered. These are going to be the issues that we're going to tackle. As you know, we have a strategic mechanism to resolve the current problems, to
Bueno, pues ya tenemos de nuevo el mismo mensaje por la parte turca. Todavía no hay decisión, pero más bien parece que no van a permitir que Suecia entre en la OTAN. Lo que ha dicho el ministro turco, lo acabamos de escuchar justo ahora en esta respuesta larga a la primera pregunta que iba dirigida a ambos respecto al acceso de Suecia y Finlandia, es que, bueno, pues lo mismo que dijo Erdogan, Finlandia puede ser evaluada de forma separada de Suecia, es decir, que Turquía puede decir que Finlandia pero no a Suecia. Es cierto que ambos países han tomado algunos pasos, han llevado a cabo algunas decisiones para poder entrar en la OTAN, pero de todas formas dice que desde Suecia no han hecho todo lo que deberían haber hecho. También aseguran, y esto respecto al tema de la quema de ese Corán, que fue uno de los temas más candentes, bueno, ahí vemos cómo ya está terminando esa rueda de prensa, se están dando la mano el ministro turco y el secretario general de la OTAN, ahí lo podemos ver, ya acaba esa rueda de prensa, pero insistimos, respecto a esa quema del Corán, lo que se ha dicho por la parte turca es que, bueno, son conscientes de que esto se realizó por personas que no están por la labor de que Suecia entre en la OTAN y que, bueno, pues quizá no tiene tanto que ver con el gobierno, pero aún así insisten en que es un acto de poco respeto y que, bueno, pues lo tienen en cuenta también a la hora de pensar en si Suecia debería entrar o no en la OTAN. Pero también lo que ha querido recalcar el ministro turco es que no es que Turquía esté en contra de que la alianza adquiera más miembros, sino más bien particularmente respecto al caso de Suecia, por esa quema del Corán y también por lo que consideran financiación del terrorismo dentro de Suecia. Ya ha terminado esta rueda de prensa, básicamente nos quedamos con eso y con las palabras también de Jens Stoltenberg, que ha dicho que, bueno, ambos países podrían ser ratificados ahora, pero realmente lo que no importa tanto es el orden, si es Finlandia primero y luego Suecia, lo que importa es que sea hecho, es decir, que sean ratificados lo antes posible. Así ha dicho Jens Stoltenberg hoy en esa comparecencia con el ministro turco en su visita a Turquía.